Mill Creek was alive. The night buzzed with excitement. Kids in costumes raced down the street, jack-o'-lanterns glowed on every porch. It was Halloween, and the air crackled with mischief and magic. This year was different for Jason, Mia, Luke and Sarah. They were finally old enough for a real Halloween adventure. This year they would brave the house on Maple Street. Everyone in Mill Creek knew about the house. It loomed at the end of Maple Street, dark and silent. Some said it was abandoned, others whispered it was cursed. Old Man Hemlock lived across the street. He was a fixture of the neighborhood, always seen on his porch swing, especially as the sun dipped below the horizon. His eyes, though kind, held a haunted look, as if he carried the weight of untold stories. He told stories about the house. The children, dressed in their Halloween costumes, would gather around him, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. They hung on his every word, eager to hear the chilling tales he spun about the family who once lived there. The family in the old vintage photo seemed almost too perfect, their smiles hiding secrets that only Old Man Hemlock seemed to know. They vanished one Halloween night. The house, now abandoned, stood as a silent witness to that fateful evening. Its empty front porch, still adorned with faded Halloween decorations, seemed to mourn the loss of its former inhabitants, never to be seen again. The old, dusty photo of the family was the only reminder of their existence, a haunting relic of a night shrouded in mystery. Some kids said the house was haunted by their ghosts. They believed the spirits of the family lingered, trapped between worlds, unable to find peace. They said you could hear their screams on Halloween night. The house would come alive with eerie lights, and ghostly figures would appear in the windows, their silent screams echoing through the night. No one dared to go near the house. The overgrown path leading to the house was a testament to the fear it inspired. Children would stop in their tracks, their hearts pounding, too scared to take another step. No one except Jason, Mia, Luke and Sarah. They were different. Armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure, they dared each other to face the unknown. They stood at the edge of town where the streetlights ended. The dim glow of the streetlights cast long shadows, making the darkness beyond seem even more foreboding. Maple Street stretched before them, dark and ominous. The old trees lining the street seemed to whisper secrets of their own, their branches swaying in the wind. The wind rustled through the trees, sounding like whispers. It was as if the very air was alive with the stories of the past, urging the children to turn back. "This is crazy," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. Her fear was palpable, her eyes wide with apprehension. She clutched her best friend Mia's arm. Mia, though equally scared, tried to put on a brave face, squeezing Sarah's hand in reassurance. "Maybe we should go back." Luke and Jason exchanged nervous glances, their earlier bravado waning in the face of the unknown. The decision hung in the air, as heavy as the whispers that surrounded them. Jason scoffed. "Scared?" he asked, trying to sound brave. He liked Sarah. He didn't want her to think he was scared. "No," Sarah lied. She was terrified. But she wouldn't admit it, not in front of Jason. "We made a pact," Mia reminded them. "We're doing this." Mia was the bravest of them all. Nothing scared her. At least, that's what she wanted everyone to think. Luke, Mia's twin brother, nodded. "We're going to be legends," he said. He tried to sound excited. He wasn't very convincing. The four friends exchanged nervous glances. They took a deep breath and stepped onto Maple Street. The adventure had begun. The houses on Maple Street were old and neglected. They stood like silent sentinels, bearing witness to the passage of time and the stories that had long been forgotten. Their paint peeled and their windows were dark. The once vibrant colours had faded, leaving behind a ghostly facade that seemed to whisper secrets of the past. The streetlights were few and far between, casting long, eerie shadows. These shadows danced and flickered, creating an unsettling atmosphere that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. The wind picked up, swirling fallen leaves around their feet. The air grew colder, carrying with it a sense of foreboding that seemed to seep into their very bones. The scent of decay filled their nostrils. It was a smell that spoke of neglect and abandonment, a reminder of the life that once thrived here but had long since withered away. "This place is creepy," Luke said. His voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might awaken something lurking in the shadows. He wished he had stayed home. The comfort of his warm bed and the safety of his familiar surroundings seemed like a distant dream now. He wished he had never agreed to this. The dare had seemed harmless enough in the light of day, but now, under the cover of darkness, it felt like a terrible mistake. They reached the end of the street. The group huddled together, their breaths visible in the cold night air, each one of them feeling the weight of the moment. The house stood before them, tall and imposing. It loomed over them like a giant, its dark silhouette cutting a menacing figure against the night sky. Its windows were like empty eyes, watching them. They seemed to follow their every move, as if the house itself was alive and aware of their presence, daring them to come closer. The very air around them seemed to hum with anticipation, as if the house was waiting for them to make the first move. "Double, dare you to knock on the door," Jason said to Luke. His voice was a mix of bravado and fear, a challenge that he hoped would mask his own apprehension. He tried to keep his voice steady. The words came out stronger than he felt, a thin veneer of courage over a core of trembling anxiety. But he couldn't hide the tremor of fear. It was there, in the slight quiver of his words, betraying the terror that gripped his heart. Luke hesitated. He didn't want to knock, but he didn't want to seem like a coward, not in front of his friends, especially not in front of Sarah. He took a step toward the house. Each step felt heavier than the last. He raised his hand to knock, but before he could, the door creaked open. "What?" Sarah gasped. The four friends stared at the open door. Their hearts pounded in their chests. They had a bad feeling about this, a very bad feeling, but it was too late to turn back now. Jason pushed the door open the rest of the way. It groaned as if it hadn't been opened in decades. The entryway was dark and dusty. Cobwebs hung from every corner. The air was thick with the smell of decay. "Hello?" Jason called out. His voice echoed through the empty house. There was no answer. Hesitantly, they stepped inside. The floorboards creaked under their weight, as if warning them not to come any further. They ignored the warning. The door slammed shut behind them. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. The teenagers jumped back in fright, their hearts racing. "What was that?" Sarah shrieked. She spun around, searching for the source of the noise. "Probably just the wind," Mia said, but her voice lacked conviction. She was starting to get scared too. The room was plunged into darkness. Their flashlights had died. They fumbled in their pockets for fresh batteries, their hands shaking. "I don't like this," Luke whispered, his voice trembling. "Let's just get out of here," Sarah pleaded. They turned to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. It was as if it was nailed shut. They were trapped. A cold breeze seemed to come from nowhere, whistling through the old house. It carried with it whispers, soft and indistinct, but undeniably human. "Did you hear that?" Jason whispered, his voice tight with fear. They listened intently. The whispers came again. This time they were closer, clearer. They seemed to be coming from the basement. "Let's not go down there," Sarah begged. She was terrified. But the others were curious. They had to know what was down there. Slowly, cautiously, they made their way to the basement door. The air was thick with tension, each step they took echoing in the silence of the night. They had heard the stories, the rumors about what lay beneath the old house, but curiosity had gotten the better of them. The steps creaked under their weight as if the house itself was trying to warn them. Every creak seemed louder than the last, a symphony of dread that played in their ears. The wooden steps, worn and ancient, groaned under the pressure, adding to the eerie atmosphere. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They were not just sounds, but voices calling out to them, urging them to come closer. The friends exchanged nervous glances, their faces pale and eyes wide with fear. The shadows on the walls seemed to dance, creating ghostly figures that moved with the flickering light. Luke reached for the doorknob. His hand hesitated. He could feel the cold metal beneath his fingers, a chill that ran up his spine. He knew that once he turned the knob, there would be no turning back. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, making his hand tremble. He didn't want to know what was on the other side. The unknown was terrifying, a dark void filled with possibilities that his mind couldn't comprehend. His friends watched him, their faces mirrors of his own fear and uncertainty. They were all in this together, bound by a shared sense of dread, but it was too late to turn back now. They had come this far. Driven by a mix of bravery and foolishness, Luke steeled himself, drawing strength from the presence of his friends. They nodded at him, a silent agreement that they would face whatever lay ahead together. He took a deep breath and opened the door. The hinges squealed in protest, the sound piercing the silence. The door swung open slowly, revealing a yawning darkness that seemed to swallow the light. The basement lay before them, an abyss that beckoned them to enter. The basement stairs yawned before them, black and bottomless. Each step descended into the unknown, a path that led to who knew what horrors. The friends hesitated at the top, peering into the inky blackness that seemed to stretch on forever. The whispers seemed to rise from the depths, beckoning them closer. They were like siren calls, impossible to ignore. The shadows moved eerily, creating shapes that played tricks on their eyes. It was as if the basement was alive, a living entity that wanted to draw them in. A skeletal hand shot out from the darkness, grabbing Luke by the throat. It was cold and bony, a grip that felt like death itself. Luke's eyes widened in terror as he struggled to break free, but the hand held him fast, pulling him towards the abyss. He screamed, a high-pitched, terrified sound. It echoed through the basement, a cry of pure fear that sent shivers down the spines of his friends. They watched in horror, unable to move, paralyzed by the sight of their friend being dragged into the darkness. Then he was gone. Dragged into the darkness, the basement swallowed him whole, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. The friends stood there, stunned and terrified, realizing that the stories were true. The basement was a place of nightmares, and they had just lost one of their own to its depths. The others stood frozen in terror. Their blood ran cold. They had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and skeletal. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light. It smiled, a gruesome, terrifying smile. Sarah screamed. Mia fainted. Jason could only watch in horror as the creature advanced, its bony fingers outstretched, reaching for him. Their screams echoed through the empty house. Then silence. The house on Maple Street stood silent once more, its secrets safe for another year. The final Halloween.